Konnichiwa, my fellow gamers. I'm your host, Sebi the Shogun, and this video is dedicated to Salamander Sunday and the 117th Salamander Regiment. Thank you guys for being a wonderful clan and giving me an enjoyable place to be myself and have fun with all the lovely people in the regiment. You're all very talented and enjoyable to play with, and you guys know how to give me a good laugh from time to time. Whether you are a staying viewer or a new viewer, welcome to my first lore storytime video. This is the story of the Songs of Democracy and how they became the Songs of Vulkan of the 117th Salamander Regiment. This is a fan-made story for the Helldivers universe lore, and I hope you enjoy. Also, disclaimer for headphone users, when I start talking about the Battle of Menkent, I do sort of get into it, so watch your volume. Also, any constructive criticism would be welcome. Please be respectful in the comments. The Songs of Vulkan are a sub-faction of forgers within the 117th Salamander Regiment and crusaders that constantly war with the automatons and cyborgs. They specialize primarily in energy and incendiary weaponry, and they use the forges of the Chalice of Fire to craft custom weapons and armor for the Salamanders. Despite their aggressive and violent behavior during combat, they still continue to follow the beliefs and empathetic ideals of the Salamanders when dealing with humanity itself, showing a mastery of controlling their hate and aiming it at their enemies, rather than allowing it to affect their behavior towards their comrades. They are loyal, extremely dedicated to the regiment, and focus their attention on conducting offensive and defensive operations from Prometheus, the moon of Menkent. The following lore is a summary of their timeline from early history to their formation and beyond. During the Second Galactic War, a faction known as the Songs of Democracy were a military force that resided above the icy world of Marfark during the first waves of automaton invasions. They were commanded by Hell Commander Jane Raven of the SCS Song of Democracy. Hell Commander Raven was a dedicated leader who advocated for equality and safety for those who lived beneath the Super Earth flag. Despite the Song's eventual plunder into hatred and vengeance, they remain loyal to Super Earth and the people of Lady Liberty, even with a bitter taste. When asked what they truly fight for, the answer between each and every soldier's answer is reinforced by the influence of Hell Commander Jane Raven. We serve humanity. We preserve it and sacrifice all that is necessary to defend it. Marfark was Jane's homeworld. She grew up with the snowstorms and the lack of suppressed corruption on the planet, and once she became a Helldiver, she vowed to always return to Marfark's defense if it had ever suffered the threat of invasion. She also vowed to the lower class that she would one day return and find a way to enter the political scene and cleanse the corruption of the rich. When the automaton armies invaded for the first time, many residents were slaughtered, and the Helldivers that fought in the planet's defense desperately tried to save as many civilians as they could. Super Earth's direct orders were to evacuate Class A civilians and to hold back the automaton threat for as long as they could while they did so. For the Songs of Democracy, they ignored the status of families and civilians alike and desired to be equal towards all individuals in order to preserve all human life that lived there, even sacrificing their place on their own super destroyers and rations to make room for more civilians. However, due to the social class ideals of Super Earth, and Super Earth itself directly informing specifically the Class A civilians that they would earn top priority for evacuation during the invasion, many Class A civilians grew frustrated over the equality that more poor classes were getting to them. Arguments turned to shoving, and shoving turned to stabbing and shooting. Civilians fought for first place on evacuation shuttles despite efforts and clear ability to grant everyone enough room to extract at the base known as Freedom's Gate. Marfark was a world more vastly built on the hierarchy of the higher class, being more isolated from society and having a low count of law correctional forces and truth enforcers. This allowed for the planet's smaller cities to be more easily manipulated by the rich families who would pay to keep the lower class citizens and families beneath their boots. Because of this, the thought of being treated equally by uncorrupted Helldivers gave the lower classes the courage and morale to rebel against the rich that insisted on their own prioritized evacuation. Hell Commander Jane Raven and the Songs of Democracy adopted many unaffiliated Helldiver ships to the cause of defending Marfark and guiding civilians to safety and attempting to stop fleeing families from dying to both automaton invaders and each other. With higher classes creating quick plots and loopholes in order to leave the lower class behind, many fights continued to break out, and even the Helldivers struggled to multitask, breaking up riots and keeping the automatons off of safe zones. Eventually, only a few ships full of citizens could be confirmed to evacuate. Only one would survive, however. On board one of the super destroyers, a group of Class D civilians got their hands on a hell bomb and were able to successfully arm it, blowing the reactor and causing the ship to veer its course into a neighboring ship, the two being destroyed in the process and nearly destroying the third with heavy damage to the hull. In the end, many Helldivers, SEAF troopers, and citizens were lost to the chaos of the invasion. In the aftermath, Hell Commander Raven received a reprimand and had her recently adopted forces split as a consequence of failure to follow normal procedure, being unable to control such a war-torn environment and wasting valuable resources rather than focusing their attention on Class A citizens and pushing back the enemy. SCAF forces were pulled back as the Super-Earth government had no longer trusted the Songs of Democracy and left them with nothing more than to prove themselves by retaking the world that even Raven blamed herself for losing. The Songs of Democracy clashed with the SCG officials over civilian protection as under the influence of Hell Commander Raven, the Songs hated the idea of treating one human being over another based on social status, never fully turning traitor, but never fully agreeing or cooperating either. Because of this, and Super-Earth cutting their stream of incoming resources because of their lack of trust, the Songs of Democracy resided over Marfark's orbit and conducted a crusade operation towards fighting naval and ground battles against the automatons while they looked for weakness in their hold over the planet. During this time, they met a faction of similar beliefs to them, the 117th Salamander Regiment, whom the Songs had frequented with from time to time during their crusades against automaton forces. Due to a lack of resources and the ability to spread out too much as a group, the Songs committed their forces to Marfark for the majority of their time in the war and focused on the use of arc and laser weapons and shield-based equipment. The regenerative batteries of this equipment, rather than being concerned with conventional ammunition, allowed for the more prolonged use in combat. The more they fought, the angrier and more hateful they became as more automatons continued to produce and march on the world. Originally a group dedicated to helping the defenseless civilians of humanity, their ties cut off from the main supply of resources only fueled their hatred and anger even more. They could not war with Super-Earth in retaliation, but they could war with the very mechanical menace that drove them to this point. Their zealous crusade for vengeance even lasted during the invasion of Super-Earth, which Hell Commander Raven and her best had split from the automaton territory to assist in defending against. Despite their long solitude of war, they still held empathy and a brotherhood within their beliefs and took care of their own, song or not. Their wrath continued to decimate the enemy's hold of the planet of Marfark base by base, until one major order changed everything. The Songs of Democracy developed a pure hatred for the automatons, with their pure use of regenerative ammo in weapons such as ARC-12 Blitzers, LAZ-5 Rovers, and LAZ-99 Quasar cannons. The Songs of Democracy conducted relentless assaults on the ground as Marfark's surface was rattled by mechanical stomps and democratic war cries of faith that shook the very air they breathed. Many of their forces used heavy butcher-medic armor for extended stim use and high protection with modified space for enforcer helmets in order to maximize protection against threats such as decapitation. When deployable bubble shields and the LAZ-13 Trident had been introduced into Warbond orders, they went out of their way to track down shipments and find ridiculous ways to legally confiscate them due to their lack of supply streams, which was a first for them considering most of their supplies came from Marfark and trading with other factions. Though before any action could be made towards their loopholes, on February 3rd, 2186, Super-Earth issued a new major order for the penetration of automaton territory in an effort to reach their capital world of Cyberstan. With no hesitation, the Songs of Democracy, led by none other than the SES Song of Democracy and its captain, Hell Commander Raven, took their forces and immediately joined the assault. Little would they know that their darkest hour was right around the corner. The Songs of Democracy fought alongside the SEAF troopers and consistently harassed cyborg ships, Vox engine convoys, and aggressively pushed into high-value assets within the megafactories of Cyberstan. However, across the board, Helldiver reinforcements were dwindling at a significant rate. So significant that allies could not keep up with the Songs pushing deeper into enemy territory so rapidly. Their hatred and anger blinding them as much as it fueled them. When orders of retreat had reached their Voxes, they were furious, though had been pulled back by Hell Commander Raven for the rescue of the trapped 77th Infantry towards the end of the invasion. As proven before with the defense of Super-Earth, the Songs of Democracy still answered the call to aid their comrades in dire need. With dwindling reinforcements, Super-Earth's forces were going to struggle as automaton and cyborg fleets enclosed them like a deflating balloon. The Songs of Democracy stayed behind. The Songs of Democracy were the last out the door, and the Songs of Democracy escorted SEAF forces out of enemy territory, sacrificing many of their ships in the process. They earned respect from their allies, seeing as underneath their completely hateful and violent nature, they still continued to maintain the values they began with when they formed. After the full retreat, the Songs of Democracy returned to Marfark with only 7 ships remaining. Hell Commander Raven issued orders to only conduct scout and scavenging parties, as all the Songs could do was look down upon Marfark's war-torn surface, as cyborg reinforcements spread across the planet like a plague. The Songs of Democracy would only continue to suffer within the following months. Despite their urge to get back into the fight, they had lost too many people and they still lacked supplies from Super-Earth. Because SEAF forces across the galaxy were still recovering from the massive loss over Cyberstan and many were swayed not to aid them, they had a hard time trading with other factions to a point that they only traded with the Salamanders. The first of the remaining forces to go were 2 ships that had been caught making deals with the cyborgs. A desperate yet undemocratic option to turn to. They were deemed traitors, their crews executed, and their vessels stripped down for supplies and resources. Then 3 more left to join other regiments due to a loss in morale, leaving the SCS Song of Democracy and the ship ran by Raven's close friend Commander Rose of the SCS Song of Meridia. The lack of reinforcements rejected their ability to reliably conduct even small skirmishes. The Song of Meridia had one day received a distress signal while patrolling the outskirts of the Andromeda sector, and intercepted suspiciously without communicating with the Song of Democracy, only logging a recon sweep of the outer orbit of Marfark system. Helldivers were reporting a large cyborg dreadnought ship attempting to approach an unregistered super-Earth vessel of unusual size, bigger than any ship in the fleet. When the SCS Song of Democracy finally noticed the Meridia's supposed recon patrol was taking longer than expected, Raven commanded the ship to engage an FTL jump to a location at a distance from the last known position of the Meridia. When they arrived, even looking from the command deck would not be able to explain what they were looking at first. A damaged message beacon would soon be recovered, and when analyzed, would reveal that the SCS Song of Meridia had moles on board, and killed half the crew while taking Commander Rose and her bridge crew hostage. The ship was taken into the hangar bay of the cyborg dreadnought with threats of assimilation and full acquirement of their data, encrypted logs, and confidential files that would grant them an advantage over the allies of humanity. In a last-ditch effort to protect their people, Rose managed to retake control of the ship as it was entering the belly of the beast. The Meridia forcefully flew and fought through the internal structure of the dreadnought, opening fire from within as it scanned for any weak points within the vessel. With enough concentrated fire and sheer faith in democracy, the ship would eventually near the core of the cyborg dreadnought and detonate its reactor, which would cause a massive explosion and wipe out both the super destroyer and the dreadnought itself. The commander's final messages specifically meant for Hell Commander Raven were never disclosed, and only were ever heard by Raven herself. This was only another reason for Raven to blame herself for more losses, especially now with the death of her best friend and the loss of the Meridia's crew. The Song of Democracy and her crew were left with the lowest morale that they had ever felt in a long time. With nothing more to lose, they turned their attention to the unregistered super-Earth ship that loomed in the dark shadow of space. Upon initial investigation, the Song of Democracy found no lifeforms or functional bots on the ship after scanning it. Only dead husks of mechanical chassis remained. They docked the abnormally massive ship, further noticing that it was made from the smelted down alloys of automaton armor and utilized weapons not found within any form of record Super-Earth had in its database. The ship was so big that the entirety of the Song of Democracy's personnel had to board it for maximum analysis, exploration, and protection detail. The ship was filled with automaton and cyborg corpses, though strangely, no humans. The cyborg bodies also looked as if their cybernetics were stripped from their bodies and piled with the automatons. As Raven and her squad made it to the bridge, they would reactivate the ship's power, its engines pulsing back to life and the systems all coming back online. Lights revealed armory forges, armory storage, and all kinds of designs never seen before all over the ship. Upon running a ship diagnosis, the entire vessel was undamaged. Only a few internals were worn out, and the logs dated far back before the Second Galactic War. The ship's name was revealed to be the Chalice of Fire, forge ship of the Salamanders headed by the individual known as Vulkan. It seemed that it was meant to be left for the regiment, but somehow never made it home. In this, Raven saw an opportunity. A path ahead that could not only possibly make up for the losses and enraged mistakes of the past, but to once again commit to a cause for helping the innocent and dedicating her life to vengeance against the cyborgs and their automaton pawns. The songs of democracy were dead to humanity, but maybe something greater could now be born with this new discovery. Raven would order her crew to prepare a course for the world of Menkent in the Hydra sector. With a rumbling boom of the massive vessel exiting an FTL jump in the orbit of Menkent, Salamander forces were alarmed at the arrival of such a massive ship over their war-torn world. Raven confirmed the friendly status of the vessel and ejected a stream of scrapped automatons from low orbit into the surface, a tribute of reusable steel and electronics to the Salamanders for the cause of Menkent's war, as seemingly a mountain of enemy corpses piled up in Salamander territory. Raven met with Chapter Master Ephron and offered the ship back into the hands of the Salamanders, while requesting for the Song's remaining forces to be recruited into the Salamanders, as they had no longer the reinforcements to wage war on Marfark. The full conversion into the 117th Salamander Regiment had gone underway, while they considered what to do with the reclaimed artifact of Vulkan, considering they did not have the reinforcement budget to maintain or even operate the massive vessel to its full functionality. Not long after integrating into the regiment, Raven had completed her trial by fire, becoming a corporal and later completing her trial by leadership to become a sergeant, all over the course of a couple of weeks, with the assistance of members of the Salamanders such as Planetary Coordinator Cordnar, Apothecary Wyvern, Sergeant Tony Montana, Brother Hollow, Sergeant Egris, Brother Neo, Brother Flamefather, and Operator Chan. Even with the swift success of her integration into the Salamanders, she still had to dedicate a lot of research and effort into knowing their history and culture. Raven spent a lot of time on Menkent, mingling with its residents and her fellow comrades. Raven also conducted a recruitment campaign for the Salamanders shortly after her new promotion with an entity only known as the Shogun, an influencer within Super Earth's galaxy-wide network. With Raven's vast study and commitment towards Salamander culture, cause, and fueling attention to their numbers, Raven soon took initiative and began learning to use the forges within the Chalice of Fire. Eventually familiarizing herself with weapon and armor designing, Raven, alongside her originally designated armorer from the Songs of Democracy, would go over and design an improved variation of the I-44 Salamander armor, the Mark 18 Vulkanite-powered heavy armor. Bulkier and more advanced than the I-44, the suit had an improved respirator, allowing the wearer to further resist smoky and hard-to-breathe environments, which naturally gave the user high resistance to gas. Given its heavier design upgrade from the I-44, the undersuit and plating were significantly more resistant to explosives and fire, and the larger profile of the suit allowed hidden compartments and more surface area for medical stims, grenades, and other equipment. Being a powered suit, it was also easier to move and removed physical stress and tiredness on the wearer from using it, allowing for further running distances before needing a break or an adrenaline shot. The armor was presented to the Chapter Master and High Command of the Salamanders, and after much careful review, the armor was prototyped, tested, and approved over the course of a few weeks. The armor was set for full production for a new unit known as the Vulkanite Shock Trooper. The Vulkanite Shock Troopers wore the newly forged Mark 18 armor and began forming from new and old Salamanders alike. The new fighting force had to be given a leader and a place to go. Sergeant Jane Raven proposed the idea of a new force, the Songs of Vulkan, that would maintain the Chalice of Fire and teach others of its forges to continue the legacy of Vulkan. The Chalice of Fire resided in orbit of Prometheus, the moon of Menkent, and soon to be home of the new base of operations for the 117th Salamanders. Neophytes, Battle Brothers, and Battle Sisters alike would help in forging their own personal set of Mark 18 Vulkanite or standard issue Tech Zealot armor, a treat from the old songs of democracy. The Vulkanite Shock Troopers would have two specializations of soldier, each traditional to a side of the songs of Vulkan. The Vulkanite Shock Troopers, as the standard specialization goes, would comprise of the soldier wearing Mark 18 Vulkanite-powered armor and wielding heavy variants of the Flam 66 torture known as Menkentian pattern Pyre Blasters. They use grenade pistols and ultimatums for sidearms and utilize heavy anti-tank napalm weapons, which are respectfully known as the Menkentian Pattern Pyre Penetrator. The Menkentian Pattern Pyre Penetrator is a weapon that fires an armor-piercing projectile that injects its target with a blast of heavy napalm and detonating the canister once it depletes itself. The Pyre Penetrator holds 4 rounds before needing replenishment. The Vulkanite Shock Troopers also carry either a backpack for the Pyre Penetrator's ammo or a backpack for a hot dog drone. Lastly, they carry thermite grenades, a handful of giga grenades, and codes for napalm-related stratagems. The other specialization comes in the form of the Tech Zealots, a hard-implemented unit by the shared culture from Chalice Keeper Jane Raven's old faction, the Songs of Democracy. These units wear a new powered variant of the CM-17 Butcher with added rear neck space for a modified variant of the B-24 Enforcer helmet for decreased chance of decapitation during battle. This armor grants the wearer synchronized efficiency with energy weapons and an enhanced supply of stims. The Arc 18 Pattern Decimator is a variation of the Blitzer that has increased damaging effects, the ability to switch between short spreads and long precise shots, and is equipped with a longer barrel with an underbarrel Fire Drake pattern napalm lobber that fires a variation of the Pyrotech grenade. Alongside this primary, the Tech Zealots wield the LAS-58 Talons, G/SH-39 deployable shields, and the AX-LAS-5 Rover. The Zealots also wield the LAS-99 Quasar Cannon for anti-tank combat. While the Vulkanite Shock Troopers deal with heavy extermination, the Tech Zealots deal in low resource management for prolonged tours in supplying and supporting their comrades with shielding and stims, clearing paths ahead of designated assault times to minimize resource consumption by other parties that do not utilize arc or laser weapons that contain regenerative ammunition. The Tech Zealots work in small teams for skirmishes, precise assaults against high-value assets, and stay out in the field for prolonged periods of time in order to conveniently reinforce teams of need. The Vulkanite Shock Troopers bathe in fire tornadoes, marching in larger assault parties to clear entire sectors of enemy territory and conduct missions with the full intent of completely annihilating enemy numbers. During the liberation campaign of the planets Kuhei and Short Bay, members within the 117th Salamander Regiment began preparing. With Kuhei and Short Bay on the verge of liberation, automaton supply chains would be cut off from Menkent, meaning that without supplies and reinforcements to supply the enemy, Menkent would be entirely vulnerable to full assault by humanity's forces. The thought of liberating a homeworld to such a dedicated society began sparking flames within the soul of Chalice Keeper Raven and her chief staff, the former crew of the Song of Democracy. Finally, a new chance to make up for the losses of Marfark, and this time with a fleet and army greater than she could ever have hoped to work alongside. With the moment of triumph approaching, she began preparing her forces for war. With no time at all, the day had come. Kuhei and Short Bay had been liberated by the forces of Super Earth. As quickly as the automatons had lost their supply chains, the Operation Fires of Liberation had begun. Over the course of a few days, the armies and fleets of the Salamanders and their allies rained down their firepower and reinforcements upon the automaton forces. With no supply or reinforcement lines to help them, the automatons would be overwhelmed by the combined force of over 3,000 ships deploying Helldivers down into their territory. The Chalice of Fire would enter its first battle, the final battle of Menkent's liberation. The Chalice of Fire, alongside other allies, both from the 117th and beyond, merged on the location of the automaton main base of operations on Menkent. A super fortress filled to the brim with fabricators and mechanical armies. Eagles poured out of their super destroyers in low orbit. Warriors deployed to the ground, and orbital cannons were readied by their helms. Chalice Keeper Raven and her Vulkanite shock troopers and tech zealots, alongside the allies of Menkent, marched into the fires of battle unto the anvil of war. Their collective footsteps rattled the earth beneath them as they opened fire, swung hammers and swords, thrusted spears, impaled flags, and blasted their weaponry collectively throughout the automaton forces. Tales sung to this day tell of the collective mass of warriors that could be seen from orbit as they marched, sending factory striders to their knees, flattening stratagem jammers, and toppling gunship facilities. They tore through hulks, melted down the hordes, and planted flags of the 117th and Super Earth into the piles of scrap that remained of mechanical corpses. As the automatons made their pathetic last stand at their base, the armies of Menkent's allies stepped over their decimated numbers. They all suppressed enemy fire with EMS and gas strikes and protected themselves with deployed shields and trenches. The armies of the Allies surrounded the base, and as the Chalice of Fire, along with every fighting ship in the Fire Planet's orbit, moved into position, each and every one of the warriors pulled their stratagem beacons and tossed down napalm barrages, 120 and 380mm barrages, 500-kilogram bomb strikes, and rail cannon strikes, Gatling barrages, and pre-activated hell bombs. The base's integrity fell apart. Buildings combusted, automaton armor melted, and boiled from the sheer heat of the flames that engulfed their base. Numbers were shredded apart, and their scrap remains decimated within the chaos. The destruction of the base was so bright with fire and explosions that it could be seen from even the moon of Prometheus. The Menkent national anthem played as Salamanders, allies, and all that fought long and hard for the world's reclamation, watched every death be paid back in spilled oil and boiling flames. Menkent was free, and the Salamanders had fully reclaimed their home. Glory to the 117th, Jane and the Salamanders sung. Glory to the 117th. Glory to Vulkan. Glory to humanity. Glory to Super Earth. Menkent lives! Menkent lives!
Burning holy fire!